Quorum.
Bonnie Simpson.
Here.
Councilwoman Jenna Simpson. Here. Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Mayor Skipworth.
Here.
Councilmember Brantley.
Here.
Councilmember Decker.
Here.
Councilmember Litton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. If you join me for item 2, the invocation, Councilman Simpson, could you lead us, please?
Sure thing. Let us pray. O Lord our God, how excellent is your name in all the earth. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, your name is great and greatly to be praised. We ask for your blessings upon the proceedings of this meeting, upon its citizens, its elected officials, its staff, this county, this state, and this great nation. Allow this to be an effective and efficient meeting and productive. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. That will move us on to item 4, proclamations, which there are none this evening. So that'll move us to item 5, announcements and presentations. Announcements concerning items of community interest. No action will be taken or discussed. Council member comments regarding items of community interest in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 551.0415. And we'll move on to item 5A, council comments. We'll start this evening with Councilman Decker.
Glad to see everybody in here. The air conditioning's working great, nice and cool, and a nice light paint. People are rather pleased with the drainage and the streets that have been done, and I think they're not as concerned about the hurricane as they would have been. Thank you, that's all.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to Councilman Linton.
Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. Spent the last week trying to schedule a meeting with the city manager to get a short tour of all the facilities because I am a newbie. And also talked with the, forgot her name, but who is designing the city's website to give her a couple of suggestions. And she sent me a preliminary look at what we're about to see here shortly. So anyway, but great to see everybody here tonight.
All right, thank you. Councilman Simpson.
Thanks, Mayor. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you out here tonight. I want to start off by extending my condolences to the family of Roy Mayfield. Also, I want to say that since we last met, I attended the Texas City Lamarck Chamber of Commerce luncheon. The county was putting on hurricane preparedness presentation, and I was able to attend that as part of my role with the Galveston County Long-Term Recovery Group. Also attended a virtual training for the Texas Municipal League on council relationships. I also want to commend the city on the work that's being done. Had some citizens express shock and surprise in Moore's Addition to see the truck out there cleaning out the culverts this past week. They were greatly appreciative of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And next, Councilwoman Simpson.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight and taking the time out of your schedule to come and speak to us. We really appreciate it. I want to thank city staff for being so supportive over the last few days as we get through the agenda and find out as much information as we can about the supporting documents for everything that we're going to be speaking about tonight. Finally, I just want to remind everybody that the Pilot Club is going to be hosting their July 4th parade like they have been in years past, and you can find that information on their Facebook page. Thank you.
And Councilman Wilson.
I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. That's it.
Okay, and I'll also welcome everybody here tonight. I want to continue to applaud staff for a lot of the work they're out there doing. I'm receiving a lot of good feedback, especially about the response to issues that are coming up here and there, so that's very well done. And I don't have a lot I would throw out this evening. That tomorrow, city manager and I will be reading to some children at the library. So if you want to help us out with that, please let me know. There's his book. And I said I do mine in hard mode. I don't want to read it in advance. You know, I don't want to cheat him, so I'll read it tomorrow. We'll see how I do. But anyway, so we have that going on. But thanks to everybody that's here. We had a meeting about the comprehensive plan before this, I understand. I want to thank everybody that's participated in that process and is helping us build that. That's an important thing we're doing. And so thank you for continuing to help out with that. And that's really all that I have for us. So I'll move on to Councilman Brantley.
Thank you. A couple of things that I've got. First off, I want to recognize today is Flag Day. I know that our country is divided in many ways, it seems like, today, but the one thing that unites us is that flag and the closeness that we have as a community. So recognizing Flag Day. The second thing I have is I met with Pastor John Gilligan at Living Faith Outreach this past week, and I agreed to share some news for him. He is starting what he's called Hope Connection Community Center. Just real quickly, the vision of the community center is Hope Connection Community Center is a faith-based nonprofit organization whose goal is to meet the physical, social, emotional, and spiritual needs of youth and adults in our community. We believe accomplishing this through qualified and loving staff, volunteers, motivational speakers, recreational activities, education, special events, sports camps, and more is extremely possible. Police presence and trained security will remain a top priority, seeing these goals met within a safe environment. So their initial launch is scheduled for July 8th from 6 to 9 p.m., which will be a family event. The entire community is invited. There'll be food, games, music, basketball, and much more at no cost. So I've got some information that I'll put out in the lobby he's got some information if anybody would like to be a sponsor, and then some information on the program itself. So I'll leave that out front. The next thing I'd like to say is, I don't know if we have anybody from the fire department here, but I would like to recognize Dickinson Volunteer Fire Department. Very, very personal moment this past Thursday. First off, let me say, it is very hot outside. Please be careful in the heat. I think that I'm a pretty healthy guy. However, I succumbed to the heat this past Thursday and suffered a mild heat stroke Thursday night. And so Dickinson Volunteer Fire Department came to my house and really did an outstanding job, and I really appreciate the efforts that they put in. So big vote of appreciation to Dickinson Volunteer Fire Department. Thanks everybody for being here.
All right, thank you. That'll move us on to item 5B, the city manager update. I'll turn it over to our city manager, Theo Melanson.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We have a couple of things we'll go over. First, we have our engineering firm, Hewitt Zollers, here. We have some new council members. So they didn't get the riveting speech about pavement conditions in the city of Dickinson. And so I wanted to kind of get everyone up to speed. We had multiple, more than one of our council members wanted to know kind of like, what are the steps for us to get to a capital improvement plan and so forth. And so step one in that process is to understand the condition, grade what you have, and then, set a budget of what it would cost to do each one of the projects. And then, really that's where the budget process, and we may even want to go to a special budget process that's outside of our regular operating, which would be the state law process, and actually talk about capital, and maybe even on the side having meetings about the capital improvement plan year over year and how do we want to fund it. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Wine from Hewitt Zollers. He's been a staple in our community and has been integral to many of our successes on the flood mitigation grants for our council that aren't aware of that. So Greg?
All right, Theo, thank you. Mayor, council, good evening. For those of you that were here back in January, I have added an additional slide to this. I stood in front of y'all back in 1 year after Harvey, in September of 2018, made a commitment. At the time, myself and Council Member Dietz had a pretty poignant conversation that night about making sure we were going to work with the city and help you in terms of preparing for the next hurricane. And I think over the past 4 or 5 years, because of some of the comments that were made tonight, because of the staff's effort, the city's in much better position now, but we still have a ways to go. We did a lot of work and came up with a drainage condition assessment and a drainage maintenance program that currently Chase and Alex are instituting. And back in around September, October timeframe of 2021, we turned our attention to the city's roadways. Theo gave us some vision on where we wanted to go with it. And with that, I want to present the results of that tonight for the new council members. So next slide, please. The agenda, I'm going to cover basically the scope that we were tasked with. I'm going to talk through the actual scientific way we approached this and how we developed what the city's deferred maintenance program is currently on your roadways, how we then structure that in terms of planning a 5 or 10-year capital improvement plan, and how we would fund that based upon a life cycle analysis. And I won't try to bore you with a lot of details, but let me tell you why this is really of the utmost importance. Number one, you want to get your streets in the best condition you can afford for your residents. And second of all, the reason why you need a program like this, I have dealt with FEMA here in the Houston area for the past 30 years, wrestling with them after disasters, whether it be the record flood in '94 up on the Lake Houston Dam, or Tropical Storm Allison, or Hurricane Ike and Hurricane Harvey. And the first thing they always say when you sit across the table from them is, prove to me what the condition of your facility was before the event occurred. And that is the hardest thing to do. And honestly, that's kind of their way out of funding any improvements. Well, I worked with a gentleman that came to work with me. He was a client for 25 years, Joe Myers. He was at Harris County Flood Control District. We use this same program on flood controls infrastructure, and that's 3,000 plus miles of channels. And we were able to develop what the condition of those channels were. And when we had follow-on Ikes and other storm events, we got money from FEMA because we could show FEMA what the condition of those assets were before the event and what they were after. Now, unfortunately, the city of Dickinson will experience another hurricane, but we want to be in position next time when we have to deal with FEMA so that we get the money that the city deserves due to the damage done by those storms, okay? And this program will help you in doing that. Next slide, please. There's a lot of words here, but back in 2016, the city went out and did a pavement condition index, and there was like 10,000 line items in this database that you all had that honestly was never updated. And it was probably good for about an hour after it was done back in 2016, and then things started to change and it did not get updated. So what we did is we went and updated that database, that GIS database, based upon all the work that had been done from 16 up till last year, about 5 years. New subdivisions had been built. The city had repaired some streets. So we took all that information, had the drawings, we updated that. We then sent our guys out and did a quick windshield survey to look at the streets based upon what we were thinking was still deficient, based upon what we were saying was good. That was a very quick windshield survey done. We then again updated the database, and we identified which streets needed to be reconstructed. And I'm going to talk through all of this, so maybe let's go to the next slide, because this is an example. This is what green is good here, okay? And red is not good. But your 2016 database had all this 7 different colors associated with these different 7 categories of failure. And honestly, I try to be very common sense with this. If somebody's driving down the road, they can't tell if it's a 5, a 6, a 7. It's either it's in good condition or it's not in good condition. Okay, so we don't need to get into a PhD level analysis to try to determine what the PCI is. It's pretty straightforward. And so that's the approach we took on it. But you can see in 16, the green was what was considered acceptable condition, and then red was the failed condition. Next slide, please. We then took all the information, and you can see there's a pretty substantial change in the green. So that means in those 5 years, the city did a lot of good work to improve the condition of the streets. And so we updated the database, and then we went out, next slide, And in November, we then started taking a real deep dive into the streets and identifying which ones still needed to be reconstructed. Next slide. Next slide, please. All right, and what we were able to determine, the purple is what we identified as the city's deferred maintenance in terms of streets to be reconstructed. And we determined, right now, the city in your portfolio has about 106 miles of roadways. And you'll see in a moment about 43.7% of that is deficient, and I'll show you the math and the science behind all that. Next slide, please. The other item that we did, some of the streets that did not need to be fully reconstructed still had potholes and other deficiencies, spot repairs that needed to be done. So we went out and identified those deficiencies and then created, next slide, we created individual deficiency reports. Now, the nice thing about this is your staff, we can use these and actually do bid items for contractors, and they can go out and actually repair these, or the city staff can do that, okay? The thing is, though, we have a record of the improvements that are being made, so when we get back with FEMA and we have damages, again, we'll be able to show that things have been repaired. Now, we did this system, this is a pavement assessment. We did it it's done on an iPhone, and we have since given that application to city staff. They can actually go out and update the existing deficiencies as well as identify new deficiencies, and it's all done with a little pull-down app on their iPhone. And they're all able to do that now, and it gives us real-time information. And the nice thing is, once they're repaired, the inspector can go out and say that has been completed. So it gives you that record again that we go back to FEMA to say we have been maintaining our assets. Next slide, please. Okay, here's where you get into the math and start looking at the life cycle analysis of your asset. These are all the various components that make up the city's roadway portfolio. The bottom line is, when I did this back in January, the city's value in terms of its infrastructure was $192 million, okay? Now, I can tell you, having arm wrestled with contractors over the past 5-6 months with what's going on in the economy, your value has probably gone up. But so has the value for the deficiency. So comparatively speaking, you have around $200 million in terms of value for your roadway asset. Next slide, please. And this is basically a breakdown on that. Looking at the deficiency cost line, which is highlighted, the $84 million basically makes up $81 million is for roads to be reconstructed, and about $3 million worth of deficiencies that were identified by the app that went out, and we identified that. It's pure math. You take the 192 and divide it into 84, and it says that right now the roadway condition index, in other words, the status condition of that asset, all the roads, is about 43.7, okay, which means it's around 43.7% deficient. So what this does, it at least defines the challenge that we have in front of us. Next slide. We then did a life cycle analysis to look out over this is just 5 years, but we looked out over 10 years to determine, we know we've got $84 million currently deferred maintenance. Well, over the next 5 or 10 years, when we're looking at preparing a capital improvement program for roads, there are things that are going to expire, right, due to their life expectancy running out. And so that's what this life cycle analysis does. So we took that into account. Next slide, please. We then take those, put them into a number, and we get these nice fancy charts, right? They're pretty simple, honestly. The blue represents the amount of dollars that the city needs to invest in its roadways over the next 10 years to maintain its status at 43.7. And you can see the middle graph, the blue line is horizontal, right? Zero slope. There's no change in the condition. But the funding for that is what, 6.8? I can't read that from here, but I think it's somewhere around that. The red is basically, we're saying right now we're investing about $500,000 a year into our roadways, That would be $5 million over the next 10 years. Now, unfortunately, we need to do 6.8 to maintain. We're not spending that right now, so the condition is going to worsen a little bit over the 10 years, and you can see the red line goes up a little bit. The last example says, let's say in the next 10 years we want to improve, and I believe, what do we have, 20%? I can't see the number there, but you can actually input in it, and we'll say we want the roadway condition index to improve down to 20%. Take it from 43 down to 20. That now gives us elevated amounts that we have to spend on deferred maintenance, take care of what's going to be broke over the next 10 years, plus eat into the deferred maintenance, that 84 million. We got to start eating into that so that we improve the condition. And we can do a lot of what-if scenarios. I mean, this is just a spreadsheet. Theo and I and Chase have sat there and looked at this and played with numbers and stuff. This very easily can be used to determine what we need to forecast in terms of a bond program should the city elect to go that direction. Next slide, please. So what we have right now is we've got a replacement program. We know which streets need to be reconstructed. We know where the deficiencies are. We know what the challenge is in front of us. We have a way of beginning to attack that. All right? Next slide. And we're doing that right now, sitting with Theo and Chase and the rest of the staff. We have these projects, these roads, which are all purple, currently under design, and we're going to look at getting those prepared for construction and funding as monies come available. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm welcome to answer any of your questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions?
This.
Oh,
No question. I just want to make a comment having to deal with FEMA on the Galveston County Long-Term Recovery Group. I concur with what you said. Watch FEMA deny many a city because those plans aren't on file, the documentation is not on file. And while some may feel like this is not a good use of resource, I feel it is an ultimately good use of resource to bring in people to make sure we have these plans on file so that we have proper documentation, proper plans in place, and it's that much easier to fund things without having to resort to other ways to take care of these pressing issues.
other questions or comments? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, do we have anything else under this item, City Manager?
Yes, I do have a couple of things I did want to bring up. Have some staff recognitions that I'd like to be able to let you all know about. I'm very, very proud of our staff. Sylvia Medina has been working with us for decades now in the court, and she just passed her Court Clerk #1 certification, so I wanted to make sure we acknowledged her accomplishment there. I wanted to take a moment to also, Shauna, I know you're here somewhere. Where are you? There you are. Is Marilyn here as well? No, she ran away. I was going to say Shauna and Marilyn went and got their Code Enforcement 2 certifications. So I just wanted to recognize them as well as we're trying to, work on, continuing to better ourselves professionally. I'm very proud of all three of these staff members taking the time to get those certifications. I was going to also bring up to you guys, let me see if I can find it here. There we go. Just wanted to let you guys, keep you guys aware that we are moving forward with the Gum Bayou, the West Gum Bayou project. Our GLO contract there is, we're moving forward. We have our notice to proceed that was issued on May 23rd. We're working with the school district to work on, and I think we actually are working out an agreement to allow for the widening material to stay on school property. I think there may be a way for us to work with them, and they've been so gracious to work with us. I think we're actually, it's going to, by us having an agreement, it's going to work well for the school district because there's a need for soil. And on our end, we don't really want to truck it very far because it's very expensive to truck it. And I believe that we're going to be having a change order reduction of $500,000 on the project based on working with our sister entity. So I just want to thank the school district for being open and working with us on that. Also, we're on a Pin Oak and Nicholstone. We're still working on that. Pin Oak is relatively close to wrapping up at this point. And on Nicholstone, we're still about 4 to 6 weeks out. IDS Engineering is saying that they're trying to work through the punch list as we speak, and I'll give you all an update on that soon. We are looking at on our CDBG MIT drainage project. We are submitting for a reimbursement to the GLO on that. Hewitt Zollers is creating an updated project schedule for it, and we're working on the final routes of the Hughes Road portion of the project. The biggest issue is trying to make sure we find the right spot, for the outfall portion of that project. So we'll, stay tuned for that as we're working through the design process on it. We are also working with Public Management and Hewitt Zollers on the submission of a hazard mitigation grant program project. That's going to be, we're hoping to get about $10 million for flood mitigation on that. And what you heard about on the ARPA funding, some of the roads that you saw that are in purple that need to be replaced, we'll be using, since it's one-time money, being able to put it on the one-time expenditure of some road replacement. So some of those roads that you saw that's currently in design phase, we'll be using ARPA funding to help rebuild those. So with that, I don't have anything else. So.
Any questions for Theo?
No, I just want to say thanks, Theo, for recognizing the city staff. I've had an opportunity to meet with several of the folks from city staff, and thank you for inviting me to yesterday's staff meeting. And I will say, very impressed with the staff that we have in our department heads, their leadership, their professionalism. Excellent meeting, great group of folks, and they're working very well together.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. We'll move on to item 6, the consent agenda. The following items are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will now be a separate discussion on these items unless a council member requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and discussed after the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion approved by Councilman Wilson, a second by Councilman Simpson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, public comments. Members of the public are invited to give comments at this time, lasting not longer than 3 minutes. Comments may be general in nature or may address a specific agenda item and should be directed at the entire council, not individual members of council or staff. Any speaker making personal attacks or using vulgar or profane language shall forfeit his or her remaining time and shall be seated. In compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council may not deliberate. Now, we have 3 general comments signed up this evening, and then we have some for agenda items. So we'll start with David Lehman. Lehman, I think I mispronounced that. Pardon me.
Lehman. Just don't call me late for dinner.
Just give us your name and your address. You already gave the name,
David
just
Lehman,
address.
3802 Texas Avenue, Dickinson, Texas. And anyway, I've been a lifelong Dickinson resident. I've changed federal law. I've done a lot of different things for a large DOD contractor. Come and gone from that corporation many, many times because I get very bored. I bought about 30 homes in Galveston County over my lifetime, and I've sold them all just because of the taxes. Anyway, what I wanted to talk to you tonight about is I kind of got upset being a Dickinson resident, and I decided I was going to deal with a Fortune 150 company and put an end to this malarkey that goes on in Dickinson, Texas, concerning a certain railroad company. And so I called the city managers, talked to a couple of them, and I started working with a young man by the name of Chase Carey. And I can't begin to tell you how enlightened I am by a gentleman that says yes, sir, and no, sir, that listens to you, doesn't interrupt you, doesn't give you any stray bullets, and keeps on point. So, anyway, I don't know if Chase is here tonight. I spoke to him briefly.
In the back, very back.
Don't stand up, Chase. Get your...
Y'all better keep him because better keep him around because if I was still working for that federal contractor, you wouldn't have him anymore. So anyway, y'all have a great night. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, sir. Next, we have Alan Jones.
My name's Alan Jones. I live at 4501 Leninger Lane. Own my home, been there 29 years. First of all, if the city council had anything to do with the repair of the railroad crossing on westbound 517, I'd like to thank you for that. I just hope that it holds up better than the last 17 times that they repaired it. Second, if the council is responsible for installing the new street signs in my neighborhood that are actually legible, I would like to thank you for that. Third, I'd like to spend the rest of my 3 minutes complaining about the drainage ditches in my neighborhood that do not drain, causing the mosquito problems. We know what the issues are. But I can't do that because I have something that's much more urgent. Did you pass the photos up for me, please? These photos are going to show a dangerous, low-hanging utility lines and power pole in front of my house on Leninger Lane. This has been an ongoing issue for a long time. I'm talking long time, I mean years. Last month, on May the 3rd at 3 p.m., I called the city as McCoy's attempted to make a delivery of construction materials to the neighborhood, and he just happened to be attentive enough to be stopped to prevent hitting the line to deliver these materials 2 blocks with special equipment, as he could not pass under this wire. These photos will show you the wire I'm speaking of and the utility pole that is leaning and extremely dangerous. Douglas Spalding, the safety officer with the Dickinson Fire Department, inspected the low-hanging wire for at least the 3rd time this year, and he made his best effort to resolve the issue. We've become quite acquainted over the years as he comes out every time that this happens. 2 weeks later, on 5/17 at 6 p.m., surprise, I had to call the city again because a truck took down the line. Please understand that my entire neighborhood loses power when this happens. Douglas Spalding again contacts the authorities for repair. Texas New Mexico Power, Xfinity, Frontier, the phone company, etc. Power was restored that evening. Less than 2 weeks later, on 5/28, 7:05 p.m., surprise, another truck took out the line. Please understand again that my entire neighborhood loses power, cable, internet, etc. when this happens. Douglas Spalding again contacts the authorities for repair. Apparently, the buck stops with Texas New Mexico Power Company. No other authority will touch their lines as they are dangerous, causing a short in the power lines. What happens when the fire truck is en route to an emergency to put out the fire at my house? Or they're unable to pass, or they take out the line themselves. My motorhome won't fit under it. It catches on the air conditioner. Please note that the unsafe angle of the power pole and how much it is leaning in those photographs. It's been knocked down by a concrete truck, dump truck. Will some vehicle catch on it and pull the pole down? Is it going to fall on me or my neighbor or you? Will some vehicle catch on it and pull the pole down? Or even the vehicle that brings it down? Will it electrocute us? This needs to be resolved now. You're all aware of it. I've done my due diligence to call the city and to come to city council meeting and let you know about it. When disaster strikes, none of us want to be considered negligent. I would really like to get it fixed. I can do without my power when it cuts out, but I'm not going to do without my neighbor or my family. It is a public hazard. It needs to be fixed. Thank you for the time and letting me speak, and please review those pictures. And look at that pole. It's going to fall. And everybody comes and looks, and they just sweep it under the carpet. Nothing ever happens. Talk to Douglas Spalding. He's going to tell you 17, 18 times he's been out there. I promise you. Not exaggerating the point. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And next we have Enrique Ordonez.
Good evening, and God bless everyone. My name is Enrique Ordonez. My address is 20911 Capulin Lakes Drive, Hockley. I'm here on representation of the Word of God. That's what we do. As you can see, is that mostly it's we're trying to get the permit for Ronda Church in the address of 2512 Termini Street.
Let me interrupt you real quick. So if you're going to talk on that agenda item,
Yes, both.
yeah, well, why don't you wait till we get to that agenda item?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry about
And then we'll do it. Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to it shortly. All right, and there's no other public comments signed up this evening. I am going to address things just slightly out of order from the agenda, so sorry I didn't get with you beforehand. So if you bear with me, we have several people signed up to talk about items 9 and 10, so I actually would like to address those now. So if you we're going to start with item 9A, and then we'll take care of 10A afterwards. All right, so starting with going on to item 9A. Ordinances. Consideration and possible action on an ordinance of the City of Dickinson, Texas, amending Chapter 12 Offenses Miscellaneous, Article 2 Noise of the City of Dickinson Code of Ordinances by prohibiting unreasonable noise in the City of Dickinson, Texas from 8 o'clock p.m. until 8 o'clock a.m. of every day, providing a penalty and amount not to exceed $2,000 for each day of violation of any provision hereof, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, providing for publication, and providing an effective date. We do have several citizens signed up to speak on this item, so we'll go ahead and take care of that now. The first person would be David Hogan.
I was born and raised in Dickinson.
Please give us your name and your address.
Yeah,
before you
David
start.
Hogan, 406 Serenity. I was born and raised in Dickinson, and we live directly behind the Starbucks on 402 FM 517 West. From what I remember, I was here 3 years ago. I guess it was 2019 when they came to ask for a permit to build the Starbucks. And what, I stand corrected if so, but at that time, they did not tell council nor the people that protested that idea of having the restaurant there, because they said, well, we're going to shut down at 9 o'clock, which they do. And they open at 5 or 6 in the morning. But what they didn't tell us was there's overnight maintenance to the place. I have the picture circulating, egg crate on my windows. There's $100 I spent and another $1,000 for soundproof glass. They have grease trap trucks, comes at 2 in the morning. They have truck mounted generators so they can power spray the building, power spray the parking lot. They didn't tell us all that. And they wake us up. 3 nights ago, I called the police. All 3 of us are out there. And he said, well, I have 20 Starbucks to do, and I got to, so he hits them in order, and he gets there when he gets there. Well, that's not our problem. And that building, when we moved in, the first question we asked, because we had a situation in Alvin like that. I grew up here, but lived there for 10 years, that the Jack in the Box was behind us, and Chief Merkel, Mike Merkel at the time, said that they were grandfathered in. So we moved. But first thing when we went to Bayou Court and Bayway Homes, they had a permit from the city, and they said these are zoned for just professional businesses, dentists, doctors, chiropractors. They shut down at 6. So all the other food places, Wendy's, McDonald's, Shell, Conoco, they're out there on 45 and 517. So we thought, okay, this is good, because we knew 517 was behind us, but it's a quiet neighborhood. There are $300,000 homes out there. And so if they do this 8 to 8 thing, that would be great, because we're waking up in the night, and they run the generators, and they leave, and the police said, well, if it's not an ordinance, we can't enforce it. And they're saying the decibel level is like 80 or 85. Well, yeah, we could probably wake up at 70, but with all this, that picture that I'm circulating, I can't even see my backyard because this covers up the windows. There's soundproof glass on top of the original windows, and I can still hear it because if it's a loud thumping thing, this is mainly keeps out chirping, high-pitched noises. So now I got to become an acoustics expert. But we put in a pool. We spent a lot of money. We can't just up and leave. And we've been there for 20 years. They've been there for 3 years. So we would appreciate if council could do something. My wife has multiple sclerosis. She needs to get rest. And I'm out there turning off the alarm to go confront him at midnight. I don't know if he's got a weapon or not, so I'm taking my life in my hands, because these are just private contractors. They're not, professional. But he just comes out in his pickup truck and he's power spraying. He wouldn't stop till the police got there and made him stop. So we would really appreciate something, because they weren't on the level when they said, we're shut down 9 and that's it. Because they said, well, if we do this during daytime hours, we're going to make our customers have to go around the repair guy. Well, that's not our problem. It shouldn't be. I mean, we pay our property taxes, and this is what I got to do. I got to wake up the next morning with 4 hours sleep and go to work. So if something could be done, that 8 to 8 or 9 to 9, something that'd be good, or at least have an amendment where there's no maintenance workers that can come out there with loud generators waking up the whole neighborhood. So anyway, whatever you could do, we'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you, sir. Next on this item, we have Sue Emmett.
Hi, I'm Sue Emmett. I live at 3508 Hill Avenue, Dickinson, Texas. I'm concerned about the noise ordinance because it was my understanding that Dickinson has a noise ordinance, and that somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 decibels is what they consider above that as being excessive noise.
85.
Yeah, okay. This is not enforced. So if we have the ordinance and it's not being enforced, why have a new one? That doesn't make sense to me. We need to enforce the ordinances that we already have in place. There are, and it was my understanding that the noise ordinances is anytime, not just nighttime or whatever. I have a problem with, in my neighborhood, very loud music at night, especially on weekends, and it's like boom, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom type music. It's right there at my head. I have called the police department several times. They told me that they can't enforce it until after 11:30 at night. I find that hard to believe. So I'd call them back at 11:30 at night and report it. It still went on. So I'm not sure what kind of ordinance that the city council is looking at. I think we need to look at enforcement of the ordinances that we have before we do a bunch of changing. Just my own personal opinion. And one more from, I didn't know that this was the next one. Who cares if a rooster crows? I'm sorry, but I was raised with animals, all kinds of animals. If a rooster crows, it crows. We're going to say, okay, we can't have any roosters here. That's all. Y'all have a nice evening.
Thank you. And next we have Kenneth Cram. Kenneth, are you here? There you are. Okay, I didn't see.
It's Kenneth Cram. I live at 414 Serenity Drive, Ballpark subdivision. Been there 20 years since the subdivision was built. My house actually was the first home other than the model home. And I'm here to talk about the proposed noise ordinance. I'm delighted that this proposal is going to be up for a vote and hopefully it will get approved. It makes me very, very happy so I can sleep at night. I want to come here to share some experiences with you due to the construction of the car wash that's almost directly behind my house. And they started construction at daylight. You know, at times it was still dark. When the concrete pumper truck would show up out there with his backup alarm beeping, 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 waking me up before daylight. Same goes with the cement trucks themselves. They got backup alarms on them too, and they got diesel motors. And they're right there with that concrete pumper truck, you know, making all this racket. And the heavy equipment, they're the same way. The cranes that they're using out there, you know, they all have loud motors on them. They had dozers out there doing dirt work. And this construction is going on, weather permitting, 7 days a week. They don't ever stop. And I've been, like I said, woken several times to the point that I actually sent some videos to document some of the occurrences that I was experiencing. Sent one to Sean, sent a couple to Chase, and I think it was helpful in getting this noise ordinance for council to take a look at it and hopefully approve it. I also wanted to share with you what's going on for the last couple of weeks out there when they're putting these cinder block buildings up out there, when they're mixing their mortar. These people use a very, very large container, a metal container, to mix their mortar in, to set the cinder blocks. And what they do, instead of washing this container out, they let the residual mortar set up. And the following day, they'll have 4, 5, 6 of these containers out there with a big stick beating on these containers. And I tell you, it sounds just like somebody's hitting a trash can with a hammer. It is just a god-awful noise. So I was like, why in the world can't you wash it out with water instead of doing what you're doing? You know, disrupting all of those houses that are backed up next to it. I mean, we got people there that are shift workers. We got people there that work from home that get distracted. And then you have retired people like me, you know, that I like to sleep late in the morning and I can't. So, in regard to the car wash, I wanted to also bring to council's attention that I think that in light of the fact that they hauled in a whole bunch of dirt and they've added a foot of concrete that the car wash is being built on, the permit that was approved included an 8-foot sound barrier wall. And that because of the elevation rise that has occurred, I would hope that we could have a city engineer go out there and witness the transit being set on that top of that concrete and find out just how effective an 8-foot wall is going to be. Because I'm here to tell you, it's probably going to be something less than 7 foot. It's probably going to be 6.5. That's how much they've raised that land out there, including the concrete. They need no 8-foot wall. It's not going to be effective. It'll be more along the 6.5 foot. So I really would appreciate it if we have somebody look at that. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is the loud music that's being played out there, especially on the weekends. It's boom boxes that are playing Spanish music that I can hear inside my house. And to me, that's just really totally unacceptable. And I would also hope that this new ordinance from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. will also be applied to the operating hours of the car wash. It all needs to be equal. His hours are longer than that right now in the permit. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I know that he's allowed to open earlier and close later than what this noise ordinance proposal is. So I really would hope that council could take a look at that as well and maybe modify that permit. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, sir. And that's all the items we have signed up for item 9A. We do have a few for item 10A, but we'll, I'm sorry?
He was not able to sign up on the sheet that I sent y'all, his name.
All right, go ahead. Yeah,
Hi. Yeah, I got in a little late. Sorry about that. Tony McDuffie I'm at 416 Serenity Drive, just like my neighbors. And best neighbor in the world, King Cram right there. I hate to pick on him a little bit, but I've been there longer than him. Actually, I am the second oldest person in that neighborhood. A lot of people don't know that, all right? I've owned my home outright since 07, okay? And I probably should start coming to these a little bit more often, you know, because the last time I came here, I got hoodwinked because we voted there wasn't going to be a car wash. You know, wasn't going to be a car wash. I didn't come to the next meeting. They reversed it. Now there's a car wash behind my house. Okay? Now, like I said before, you bought your property expecting it was going to be kind of the way things are and the promises you were gave. I had a forest behind mine. Okay? Nice, scenic, quiet. Now, I've got a car wash, okay? Now understand that. 20 years later, I have a car wash. And the city council changed their mind. Not one of you would have wanted a car wash behind your house. Period. Good money to hear a car wash. But that's not why I'm here. So it's too late for that. So now we hear about the ordinance, the sound ordinance. And my friend is right. Early in the morning, 6 in the morning, banging, noisy, late, all kind of noises. And it's just kind of old. Yes, I just pumped down $24,000 to get double pane windows, you know, halfway because, you know, happy wife, happy life. But the other reason is because of noises. You know, I shouldn't have to put down all that kind of money because of noise. So, what are we gonna do about it? We're here now. The car wash is being built. So all we're asking for is a little bit of relief. A little bit of relief. I don't think that 8 to 8 is a lot to actually, you know, go considering the city council told us we weren't gonna have a car wash at all. But here we are. So, and I, with my friend here, and my new neighbor that I just don't know, and I know you've been here forever. David, we don't, you know, I should talk more, but, you know, I work with the FAA, I travel a lot, but that's not what we're here. Anyway, I think it should be permanent. I know the lady, she spoke and said, hey, we should do, you know, what we got. Well, that's with the police, I don't know. All I know is about the ordinance, is that I don't want to be hearing a car wash at 9 o'clock at night. I don't want to hear a car wash at 10 o'clock at night. I just don't. And I think as a good taxpayer who was made certain promises, that was reneged on, okay? That was reneged on. Think about that now. It was in writing. Bayway Homes was in writing. And this council, some of them are still here, reneged on that. That's really hard to take from people that's supposed to be looking out for us. So I think 2 hours on the front end, 2 hours on the back end is not a lot to ask. So I appreciate your time. I really like for you to really consider it for real. Don't brush it off. Don't kick it to the curb. And I mean on a permanent basis. Really consider it. I don't think that's too much to ask. You guys think that's too much to ask? I don't. I really don't. So, I think I'll be coming to these more often. So, thank you for your time. And who's the new mayor now? That's how long I have been not
That'd be
here.
me. That'd be me. I voted against the car wash, actually, but just so you know. I think just to be fair to everybody up here, I'll just say, I think one person up here voted for it, the rest voted against it or weren't here to vote for it at all. So just to, there we go. But
That's my case.
anyway.
But thank you. And thank you. And thank you. Hey, this looks nice. It's been a while. I'm gonna come again. But anyway, please consider that, guys. Outside of the humor, it's a pain in the butt to have to wake up and go to sleep to that noise. And he's right. They're banging 6:15 this morning. It sounds like they were playing congas on the side of our house. 6:15 this morning. Waking up to that. So, you guys have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, and we have no other comments signed up for this item. So we do need, and it could be amended later, but we do need a motion to take up a discussion of council of this item. So if somebody would like to make a motion.
Move to approve.
There's a motion to approve by Councilman Simpson. Is there a second? Item 9A, correct? Yes. Okay, and there's a second by Councilman Wilson. So any discussion?
Yeah, I guess I can start it.
Go ahead,
So
Councilman
my
Simpson.
understanding is the current ordinance is from 6:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m.? Yes, sir. And I've heard that the specific construction workers are citing the ordinance when people show up to make complaints that it's 6:30, I can get started. I guess a question for city manager, is this in line with this our current noise ordinance rather? Is that in line with other cities? Do other cities start at 6:30 in the morning and go till 10:30?
No, this is, and I'll defer some to Justin just because I know he works with a lot of cities as well, but even just doing a very, cursory look at many of the communities surrounding us, for ourselves, being 6:30 to 10:30 is quite a broad range of time. Most cities, will have something around maybe starting 7 or 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, but normally it'll shut down, between 8 or 9 o'clock is kind of where you're looking at. Some cities have a special permits to allow for limited periods of time to go outside of those times, but the 6:30 to 10:30 is probably the broadest range I've found, of many of the, pretty much any city I've seen. Jess, I don't know if you want to follow up or you have
Sure.
your own.
So look at the scope, it's all over the place, is really the answer to that. Yours is more generous as far as the times to allow for the noise. I know one of the comments from Citizen was about enforcing the current ordinance. What's proposed tonight is an amendment to your current ordinance, so this is just an amendment to what's already there. And so if the council were to approve this, depending on whatever amendments they would make, that's what they'd be doing, is taking action to enforce what they have on the books. This is going to be, really, what's proposed for you now is shortening the time from 6:30 to, I think it's 10:30, down to 8 to 8. And then, and so what essentially doing is leaving a 12-hour window instead of a limited one. And you have some other issues that I would say in your ordinance that allow on weekends. There's different kind of times that apply, and it was written a little unclear. Here, what you're doing is no matter what, 8 to 8, that's the standard. So for every kind of what they would call a nuisance type noise. Second question would be, so some cities would approach it as hours. There's some cities that do it more, that don't put hours to it. They'll do more like seasonal type effect, and that they do that a lot for the construction type work that we're talking about, because summer hours are longer, that in order to not promote those but to allow for those types of construction activities to happen, you have more time in the summer to do that. So, and not just construction, other type of entities that you allow, like summer season is light to dusk or something like that. But so that's another component of that. One thing you'll see that's pretty common, it's going to fluctuate a little bit, but you'll see in some other cities, is that it's a decibel level. You have 85, which is, I think it's pretty standard, and the reason that's that way is because there's a state law in the penal code. It defines a nuisance noise to be 85 decibels. And so because that's listed in the state law for they call it disorderly conduct for that kind of noise, then a lot of cities, what you have done too, is adopt that decibel level. Some will go lower than that. But what you need to do, if you're going to consider going lower than that or adjusting that decibel level, then I would suggest that you have some kind of study done to measure decibel levels and what noise happens at property lines. Because what this is going to do, your ordinance is that way now. So when the police arrive, if they get a noise complaint, like say it's 11:30, like we heard, 11:30, and somebody's banging on a steel drum outside your house, to be considered a nuisance under your current ordinance, that even as it stands, the police have to come and do a measurement of the decibel level, because that's the standard, is 85 decibels. And so if it's less than that, then there's no offense, there's no nuisance under the current code. So really, you're not adjusting the decibel level. What you're adjusting is the time frame. Again, nothing would stop you from adjusting the decibel level. I would suggest you do a study on that to figure out what it is, what you would deem to be a nuisance type level for decibel that would give your police the ability to come out and measure those sounds at property boundaries.
Justin, also, just so for council, because that may be a two-part step, because obviously they may want to, there's nothing prohibiting them if they decide they would want to adjust the hours and then come back at a future meeting, have the study done to properly adjust the decibel level as well? Is that?
That's right. So, I mean, right now, it's just adopting the ordinance as it is. And if you wanted to add, nothing would stop you from adding something in the ordinance that, if there's any provision you would like to add in there. I mean, right now, it's just any noise would be deemed unreasonable. It'd be a nuisance if it's anywhere between after 8 p.m., before 8 a.m., and then again, measured at your property line at 85 decibels. One thing that Theo mentioned that's not in your code at all now, that again will be a separate kind of council action, but to think about is that you doing an 8 to 8 from a business owner's type perspective. You're going to hear complaints. I know Starbucks was mentioned tonight, and it sounds like the contractor there mentioned something that I would assume you're going to hear, is that you're going to hear business owners say, or even construction development teams are going to say that this is too restrictive on them, that if it is summer hour and at 6 o'clock in the morning, daylight happens, and they're running short on time, they're going to say you're killing 2 hours of our development time. That's money in their pocket. And your ordinance can still stand against that argument. But what you can do is, again, a separate action you could take would be to, have a noise type permit that Theo mentioned. And what you can do is like a temporary noise permit where a company can come in for a certain amount of time. And there's a lot of ways to structure this that, maybe with a certain amount of notice to neighboring property owners, or to under the approval of property owners, or subject to public hearing. A lot of ways you could structure it, that you could issue a temporary noise permit to certain entities so they could perform outside the limits of what you have here. So that your 8 to 8 still stands at 85, but if you know something's going to happen that's a temporary type noise that's going to violate this, they can get a permit to do that. That's how some cities handle it. But anyway, that's a long answer to say that generally it's all over the place what cities do with noise. Why you're going to see 85 decibels, as that's mentioned in the penal code. 8 to 8 is right in the scope of a lot of other cities do.
Okay, Councilman Wilson, you had a question as well?
Okay, I think that, I hope this is working for everybody. And don't start booing. I was in the construction business, and time is money. But I think we also have to consider the neighbors. One of the things that, to me, we should have in this ordinance is, okay, if you're constructing commercially next to a residential neighborhood, your sound barrier needs to go up first before you get in there and start drilling in and putting in the cement trucks and stuff like that. It won't stop all the noise, but it'll help a heap, trust me. And we ought to set the minimum on those fences at 8 foot or whatever. I know that anything over, I believe it's 6'6" is required to be engineered now under windstorm code. The thing definitely needs to be engineered and have a certificate. After all, we ought to be, the neighbors are there. A lot of this stuff came in late, okay? Second off is I think there should be in the ordinance where you have to be, if you are a certain distance, if you're within a certain distance to a residence, or the residence property line should be the factor, then you can't start until such and such time. Because if you're out where there's no residence, it's not right to make you start at 8 o'clock in the morning when you're not going to be bothering anybody if you started at 6:30. And I think it's a compromise to the construction industry and to the residential industry to come up with an ordinance that has some of these features in it. When I was in the construction business, I worked in several subdivisions up in Houston. And trust me, they would have, you better not bring a concrete truck in there with muddy tires, or dump truck with muddy tires, or you better have somebody out there clean that street. Your noise was only allowed, certain levels. I mean, things like this. So it can be done. It's been done in a lot of places. and maybe it's time that Dickinson just stepped up and did this. I sympathize with the people out there. I remember when that subdivision first started. As a matter of fact, on that corner where y'all are talking about, where the bank and all is, that originally was supposed to be a fire station. That was going to be the second fire station for Dickinson. The developer at that time was going to donate that land. I talked him into it. I was on planning and zoning at that time. Of course, he sold that subdivision, so we're stuck with where we are. Like I said, but we need to have something there to where to protect their neighbors when the construction starts. You know, and a distance from their property line is a good starting place. Because like I said, it's not fair to, if I'm not able to hit where I'm going to be disturbing anybody, it's not fair for me to have to start later.
Yes, sir. And Councilman Wilson, what we can do is, probably dealing with the construction and kind of the phasing of construction will probably fall under our development service code. So we can definitely, I'll talk with Yvonne to see kind of how we handle that. Also, just so you know, and one of the things I was just talking with Justin a little bit about was in the ordinance that's proposed, what you can see is that with the pneumatic tools and things of that nature, it's definitely for maintenance and so forth. It says the 8 to 8 applies to anyone within 150 feet of the residential lot line. That can easily be, the ordinance can easily be amended for construction as well, because we already kind of have the language built into there. So it really is the flavor of the council and kind of what the needs of the community are. So some of the language is in there. We can just add it to the construction portion if you'd prefer that there be, that the 8 to 8 restriction be more tightly hemmed into residential areas.
Well, part of this is in the construction of this thing. And this ordinance, what you have is you have two items over there that's been discussed here. And it's not just at the Starbucks. We had a similar situation with McDonald's and them, the dumpster drivers dumping them things at 4:30 in the morning and all and banging them, and you could wake up the subdivisions, I believe, all the way over to even your neighborhood, and people were protesting that. And I believe our chief went out there and was going to arrest the driver if he came and did it again. But anyway, you're going to have something that occurs for the people that are having these crews that come in and do cleaning in the middle of the night and stuff like that too, because they make just as much noise. And I don't even know on the Starbucks, were they supposed to put up an 8-foot sound barrier for y'all too on that when they built the Starbucks?
They talked about a 10-foot barrier, they never did it, wooden fence.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay. So, I mean, those sound barriers don't stop everything, but they help.
Some of the sound barrier stuff can be easily added into the zoning ordinance, especially in the residential areas. So that's something that the P&Z can look at, and then we can do a city staff initiated change for that to come.
I'd also like to see, we added it somewhere in that ordinance at one time for them, if you're cleaning a piece of property for a construction site, like where they put the Dollar General out on 517, they were supposed to leave the trees and stuff as a natural vegetation line across that, where it entered that subdivision. They went down and tore them down. They should have been made to put them back up. Sound barriers, trees and stuff on property lines like that as part of the landscaping would be very beneficial to the neighborhoods and everything else. Plus it adds to the beauty of the property, and they do stop the sound.
Yes, sir. Well, that's dealing with development code and so forth, so that's not the noise
Maybe
ordinance.
it's time to address it all.
Yeah, we can deal with that. Right now, we are on time and decibel levels of a noise ordinance.
Other questions or comments? Councilman Brantley, and then I see you.
This is a question for the city attorney. Under the penal code, section 4201, disorderly conduct, the penal code, subsection C, does not put a time limit on the charge for disorderly conduct. No. It simply says that if the sound is above 85 decibels, actually it says, for the purpose of this section, an act is deemed to occur in a public place or near private residence if it produces an offensive or prescribed consequences of a public place or near private residence. And 2, a noise is presumed to be unreasonable if the noise exceeds the decibel level of 85 after the person making the noise receives notice from a magistrate or peace officer the noise is a public nuisance. So does that cover up our ordinance, or how does that affect our ordinance?
As a home rule city, to make rules can not supersede that, but you're able to do health and safety rules for that, and this would be one of those. And the timing, generally, I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons for the time limits that are out there across the board, but primarily, it's to help your police department not be answering noise complaints throughout the day. And so the issue that's several court cases have come up about cities that when they either don't put a decibel level, well, it's when they don't really put a decibel level, or they'll say something like an unreasonable noise, and then, so they get issued a citation, and then that's going to get challenged in court because you have to define what is unreasonable. So that's why the penal code will put the 85. But the time frame then, more than anything, is to to lessen the burden on your police department or code enforcement coming out there and trying to do decibel level measurements during daylight hours when some of those noise levels may be more deemed reasonable, for the average ear.
So, and that was going to be my next question. And I apologize, my computer messed up, so I don't have all of my notes. But I was reading last night with regards to the makeup of the ordinance, and maybe I don't, and I admit I may not understand the amending language, but it does say, and I read some of the case law that you're talking about, and in the amended ordinance, it says by prohibiting unreasonable noise, and there is no, does the 85 decibels stay in the ordinance?
The decibel level being there is kind of like unreasonable being in the ordinance heading, and then whenever you get in there, it's defined as at this time, this decibel level.
Well, if you look at 1226, and this is your current code now, I mean, it says that it measures 85 degrees decibels. That's the nuisance level outlined in your code. So that's how you define what an unreasonable level is. It's already in your code as 85 decibels, and it's in the nuisance section of the code. So that's where you're getting that number to measure.
Sure. And that was just my not truly understanding how the amending language worked. I do have a couple of questions for you, Theo. When we heard from the comments, several of the comments are a little concerning. We had the comments about Starbucks and overnight emptying of the grease traps and the dumpsters. Two of the other comments referenced times that are already outside of, before daybreak and outside of what our existing ordinances say. So what step, do you know what steps we've taken and why this continues to be a problem after they've issued complaints and had the police out there, and why we still have issues?
Well, I think one of the big things, and it's going to be something that Chief Morales and I are going to work on as well. So some of it is really, first of all, we need to have a more reasonable time, because really 10:30 in the evening, a lot of times people give up by 10:30, and that has happened a couple of times. We've had people start calling at, say, 8 or 9, and by 10:30, they're like, well, okay, well, whatever the noises were, it's over, but now I'm up all night, type of situation. So we've had that happen. I think another thing, too, is really going to be making sure we have all the equipment we need. So part of what I'm going to be talking with Chief Morales is basically getting all of the equipment to make sure that we can actually, whenever we issue the citation, that they have all that. Basically, if it means that we have to make sure that every unit has the equipment necessary, because we may have 1 or 2 or 3, but if it happens to be an officer on patrol that is called to the noise and their unit doesn't have the equipment necessary, that could also pose an issue. So when we come out of this, one of the things is we're going to go I'm going to sit with Chief Morales, and we're going to go through this ordinance and say, we're going to be enforcing it. What do you need to enforce the rules as it's written, and what the council has requested, how we enforce this rule? And the truth be told is, whenever you're starting from 6:30 to 10:30, it's, I would also say is that, dealing with the decibel level, and that's why I think it's going to be important that we do maybe look in a 2-step process, making sure we get the hours where they need to be, but also maybe getting some type of study done for the level, because, be honest, 85 decibels is surprisingly high. I'm not going to.
Just for reference, I'll just interject. Just for reference, 85 decibels is like if a blender was right here, like operating next to me. Like that's the sound level that would have to be on your property. But anyway.
So some of the relief that our, residents are seeking, and I don't necessarily disagree with some of the unfortunate situations they've dealt with because, I think they have been very reasonable in asking, hey, they've asked us, Chase has been involved, our code enforcement officers have been around as well. And, sometimes they start before 6:30, but a lot of times they'll kind of skirt around 6:45, and it's very early in the morning to already be doing that. So to answer your question, Councilman Brandley, is going to be sitting with Chief Morales, making sure we have the equipment to enforce, showing our patrol officers these are the hours when we have a noise complaint. What do you need so that we can actually prove the facts of the case so that we can actually issue citations and know that they'll stick.
So I guess the only other thing I have is I really have no issue amending the time in the morning. I think that that's perfectly reasonable, 8 o'clock. I am a little concerned on the effect of 8 o'clock in the evening on some of our businesses that are, may have entertainment, or even our football venue for that matter. I would almost be inclined to petition the council to amend the ordinance to be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., which I think would be reasonable for some of our businesses in town that may have entertainment. I wouldn't want them to be overburdened by a time that's. I have no issue amending the time, especially in light of, I guess in light of two things. The first thing is the impassioned comments that we've heard this evening, but also I will say that I paid attention when we had the extensive car wash debate, and I do know that the folks with the car wash, made several comments about how they wanted to be good neighbors and they wanted to be, mesh into our community, and we don't even have the doors open and we have issues over noise. And so it's a little disappointing that they haven't been a little more, especially with some of the issues that have been raised, that they haven't been more inclined to try and work with the neighbors. So that would be my only thing. I'm a little concerned about the 8 o'clock at night more than I am the 8 o'clock in the morning. So.
All right, Councilman Decker and Councilman Litton as well.
Yeah,
We'll start with Councilman Decker.
Previously, we had problems with the trash people starting before, early in the morning. And I don't know where it's written, but it's 7 to 7. That's what they agreed to. For the dumpsters banging to the doors and all that stuff.
That's probably in the contract with.
I would think so,
I
but
would think.
just to add to what y'all.
Councilman Decker, in your current ordinance, refuse collection is in this ordinance. And there may be another thing that conflicts with what this says, but the current time, it says the collection of garbage, waste, or refuse between the hours of 10:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. in any area zoned residential or within 300 feet of an area zoned residential is a nuisance. But that's, again, the change,
Well, they were
proposed change
starting
here.
before, early in the morning, and to my memory, maybe
I think the new contract says 7 to 7. I think
7
it's what their
o'clock, they will not
contract says,
start.
yeah.
And I haven't heard that happening. So
Well,
that's
and
good.
then that was, that contract was probably amended with, or worked with AmeriWaste because of some prior issues, and maybe to make sure that we don't have to worry about having to negotiate that in a contract.
That's right.
Just put it in the ordinance, and then it's not a negotiation
But
anymore.
it stopped early, and 7 was the time.
Yes, sir.
All right, and Councilman Linton?
So I did a lot of reading on this. So I've been playing music in the area for about 30 years, and when I was in college, I lived behind a car wash. The only reason I didn't like that music is probably because it wasn't my own. But I empathize with the citizens here tonight. In my experience in the area, almost every city I've been in that at a venue that I performed at that had an issue, it was 10 p.m. and 85 decibels within a certain distance from the facility. Each of the venues had their own dB meters, and so when the police would show up at some of the ones that had issues, frequently the police never would have. The police are the main enforcer of this. When they when there's a complaint, it goes to the police department. But they never had DB meters. They would just show up, mention to the owner, there's been a complaint, and then if nothing was done and they got a call back, they would then start issuing tickets. I know some venues over on 646, they had some people in the townhouses across the street, and by the way, they measured the traffic down 646, and it was generating 110 decibels, about 50 feet from 646. But the low frequencies that are generated, like when live music is performing, those sound abatement solutions, and also the large trucks, when they're in the, when they're picking up dumpsters, they're not going to do much for the low frequencies, anything below 80 hertz. I don't want to get into the technical aspect of it, but anyway, high frequencies will take care of that. I would like to try to find some sort of, I think about the businesses, not just about me and my gigs, but the businesses. I know some of them in this area do rely on that, and they seem to have a good relationship with their neighbors, and have given them their contact info, and that's how the problem was resolved on 646. They finally found out who was complaining, got with them, bought them noise-canceling headphones. It was hilarious. But anyway, finding some sort of exception in the ordinance that allows, prevents the businesses from being impacted, just like what Mr. Brantley said. I agree with him. And on the time, the same thing. It's 10, in the area, it's 10 p.m. to, I don't know what the start time or the end time would be, about 8 a.m. But the ordinance is probably going to be a combination of multiple factors. It's probably going to be 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. with 85 decibels within a certain distance of the venue. And then it would go further and drill down further into only being applied to a commercial area, and whereas residential, there's actually a car wash by my neighborhood, and and Johnny lives around the corner from me, and I can hear it every now and then, and that's during the middle of the day. So anyway, I'm hoping that we can find some middle ground to not impact the businesses, but also take care of your issues as well. That's all I had to say.
I have a question, a couple comments. And my question would be, so when we talk about the 85 decibels, that is not at the source, correct? That is at, so if I have the complaint, right? Say my neighbor's having a party and I complain that it's too loud. It has to be 85 decibels, like from where I'm complaining from, right? So if I'm like in my living room, you have to hold up the decibel meter and say it's 85 decibels.
Property line, so that's where the.
Like the property line, okay.
Yeah, so like if you had,
Property line.
the standard also, like I say, the car wash, if, all the neighbors are affected, or like one property owner calls in a complaint, you go to the back fence or whatever backs up to the car wash, and that's where you'd measure the decibel, the measure there, and if it's 85, it's a violation.
So one example that came up was Murray, for instance, so they have live music, right? So I think you're not gonna run into an issue with that because where the property line is, right, when they play the loud music, that everything is so far down, the homes are far enough away, that probably in that instance, it probably would not.
I think the businesses that have live music in this area are most likely not going to have an issue. They may be impacted if we start things at 8 p.m., but they're in commercial districts, commercial areas, whereas the issues that the people here are having are right next, well, it's a commercial, but it's right up against a residential. So we need to write the ordinance to allow for that.
Well, the problem, I think, if you sit down and look at a zoning map, those are some pretty fine lines in a lot of cases.
Oh, they are, yes.
That's gonna, I think that's the only complication. I don't know that it's insurmountable, but.
And then as far as those trucks, the low frequencies, there's really not much you can do. Not that I'm aware of. So maybe we could get consult an auditory engineer. It's only going to deal, your sound abatement is most likely, and this is my uneducated opinion, going to suppress the higher frequencies. And I do not know of a way that you're going to be able to have some sort of structure that's going to provide sound absorption for those low frequencies. So at that point, you would have to write the ordinance to basically be more focused on time, on the hours at which they're allowed to empty dumpsters or large equipment, is operating in that area.
Well, a couple other comments. So I think just my feeling, 6:30 is pretty early to be doing stuff, to me, especially for construction. I mean, the other thing is that if you're doing construction, you could show up and start working at 6:30. You just can't be doing something that is obnoxiously loud. You can work inside of a house that's probably not going to impact people. So I don't think that this is, it just stops all progress and doesn't let anybody do anything. As far as the ending time, I feel like my guess is, and my gut response from hearing some people, is that probably the bigger issue is in the mornings rather than in the evenings. That said, I think some of the specific issues that were brought up are kind of problems within our current ordinance that aren't even, especially with you talking about the power washing and things like that. That seems to be a problem with what we're doing currently. Whether we change this or not, that's an issue that needs to take place. I think Mr. Cram's issues are a little more, there would have to be some adjustment, right, to address some of this stuff. And my understanding is the issue is more in the morning. Is that's correct with you? Yeah, that's the sense I'm getting. So I'm a little more, I personally, if someone were to propose maybe extending it, letting it go on later, I'd be more okay with that. I would more rather see it moved up in the morning, I think, personally. Are there any other, so I'd say a couple things. Are there any other comments, questions, or anyone want to propose a change? There has been several changes have been floated, but no one has said, hey, I want to amend this motion to do whatever.
For just
Yeah,
procedure, make it easy. We can still, you don't have to worry about amending any motions or whatever. Just say, we can say, because this is the first reading, so it's going to come back to you for
Right.
second reading. So second reading, if you even approve it as it is,
True,
we can
okay.
include all the, whatever changes you guys discussed tonight.
Okay. So are there any things anyone would like to propose to change ostensibly for a second reading?
Well,
Council
Come
Wilson.
to 8 a.m.?
Hang on, Council Wilson.
I think the ordinance could be fair both ways if it's from late, 7 in the morning till 10 at night. 10 at night covers most of the businesses, and I understand, some of the problems are is because it's a construction site that's going to go away. We're going to have to contend, the rest of it's going to have to be with the car wash. I think most people are reasonably up. I know I'm up at 6, but most people are reasonably up probably about 7 in the morning. And like I said, the practice of starting real early in the construction is because it gets hot real fast this time of year. So, but there's no excuse for them not being better neighbors. And you are right, on a construction site, there's a lot of things that you can do without making the most noise at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning. So, but like I said, there should be something that it has to do with distance from the property line on these construction sites. Because if a person, like I said, if you're building across or down the road from there and it's nobody close to you, you're penalizing a company that could get a lot of work done in an hour and a half or two, especially with those pumper trucks now. And everybody pours concrete nowadays. I don't care what it is. They use a pump truck. You usually get your pump truck arrive. It's dark still. I know when I poured, I'd have them out there at 5 o'clock in the morning set up. So, we need to have a working deal with the citizens too, but we can't be careful not to shut down construction too, so.
Councilman Linton.
From what I've heard, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. is what Mr. Brantley said as well. That was what I came up with last night. That would be
10 or
what I said.
10:30?
10 p.m.
Okay.
till 8 a.m.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion.
I'm just kind of taking a feel of the room.
Factoring also the 85 decibels and
Okay.
the distance.
But you're just proposing to change, because I guess what we're saying is you're proposing to change the ordinance as written, just to change that part. Okay.
And Linton, you also mentioned putting some distinctions between residential
and
commercial. Right.
I would say to Councilman Wilson's concerns, there are, first off, in the ordinance, as it's written, there's 150 foot from a residential lot for any operation of power equipment. Also, I would say that for construction activities, to your point, I understand that a lot of times it's more efficient to start construction earlier, especially during the heat, There is a exception process within the ordinance where whoever the developer is can go to Public Works and Community Development and petition for a waiver. But what the change in this ordinance would do is, instead of putting the onus on the neighbors and the residential area to police the noise, it puts the onus back on the developer that if they want to operate before 8 a.m., they're going to have to work with the neighbors to get their concurrence and make sure that they are respectful of the neighborhood in order to get a waiver to operate before 8 a.m.
Councilman Simpson?
I was just going to have a question on order because the motion as presented is 8 to 8, but I've heard 7 to 10, and I've heard 8
So
to
what
10.
Justin is pointing out is that we have to do 2 readings. So one way we could do this, probably a simpler way, rather than having a bunch of votes about amendments, is everybody lays out the changes they'd like to have. And then we just vote to approve this version of it. And then at the second reading, we can come back with those changes incorporated.
Right, we got 2 conflicting morning times. I was just
Correct.
trying to get clarity on which one.
I would support 10 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Okay.
I read quite a bit of the comments that were happening on Facebook and checking out what some of the citizens had to say about some of the timings. And overwhelmingly, it seemed like 8 o'clock was almost too late to begin. Personally, 8 o'clock is way too late for me to begin my day. I do sympathize with the residents that live in that neighborhood. My aunt lives in that neighborhood at 411 Serenity, and I understand what you guys have been going through. And I think I agree with Councilman Wilson when he says that, and Councilman Brantley, when I say that we can perhaps put it back on the developers to get the waiver needed in order to operate times and noise outside of the allotted hours. So with that, I would probably be in support of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And also adding in that piece about, like I said, having the waiver on there and to put it back on the businesses. And additionally, some of the comments on there also said, I just want people to understand that's not necessarily meaning that you have to have quiet hours between that entire time. And, they kept saying, my colleagues kept saying, unreasonable noise. Well, I mean, basically you just can make noise, but not above 85 decibels is what they're saying. You can do hammering, you can do sheetrock, you can drop things. There's a lot of things that are just under 85. So that's all I have.
All right. Okay, so we're just going to vote because I don't know what everybody wants to do. So there's a lot of different times. So
I think to make it the clearest thing, just you can amend your motion to approve subject to the changes. And just so you know, I'm okay with 2 different, I know we have a 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The ordinance that's going to come to you will have, that can be a point of discussion for the next.
I'm just saying we don't, I don't see clear consensus on that, so.
Okay, I'll amend it for that then. Thank you.
Is there anything else anyone would like to see put in there? Okay, hearing none, take this to a vote. Remember, this is the first of 2 readings, so nothing is set in stone, everybody, so don't freak out. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to item 10A on a related note. Item 10A, discussion concerning amending the Dickinson Animal Control Ordinance to include prohibiting or limiting owning roosters inside Dickinson city limits. I want to stress this is a discussion item only. This is not an action item, so no roosters will be harmed this evening. All right, so I'll turn this over to the city manager maybe to just kind of lay things out for us.
Give a little bit of a background of why we have a discussion item with no action on this. I wanted to say we had a very gracious guest with us for a few meetings, Mr. Elliott, Mr. Jason Elliott, and he had some very poignant concerns dealing with some of the the issues surrounding roosters in the city of Dickinson. And of course, those were during public comment when there's no opportunity to have any type of discussion in any way, shape, or form. And so when he and I were talking offline, and he's like, obviously, he was wanting to know, well, what can we do? And I said, well, look, sir, really haven't really sat down with the council, and the proper, forum for that is for us to be, if we're going to have the most open discussion about it, is for us to be in an open meeting and put it as a discussion item. And my explanation to him was, I said, because quite frankly, roosters, considering all the other things we're doing in the city, roosters have not necessarily been the highest priority on things that I've been thinking about of late, on like, getting things worked out for the city. But I said, the perfect forum for this is, let's put a discussion item. I said, because there are many avenues the city council could go in. As it currently stands, our current ordinance basically treats, there's currently obviously no restriction in the ownership of fowl in the city of Dickinson. And basically dealing with roosters is a noise nuisance issue. And so one option is, us cleaning up how we deal with the, in the ordinance and tie it in more tightly with our SOP and make sure we have a more streamlined noise nuisance SOP that lines up with our city prosecutor and animal services department. That's one avenue. Another avenue, as I explained, was that, it could be a prohibition of roosters only. And then there's also prohibition of all chickens. And then also there's all there's so many different things, like tying it to zoning and all these things. And I said, the best way for us to have this discussion and talk about all these things is not at a public comment where the council can't speak back, but let's open up a discussion. And so that's how we got here. That's why it's on the agenda. So.
All right, so what do y'all think about roosters? That's why I ran for office. I'm sure we all did.
Thing I'll say.
Okay.
I don't know how Councilman Wilson slept till 6 o'clock this morning, because I was up this morning at 3:30 with the roosters.
The roosters, there you go.
Well, I said I get up at 6 o'clock. I didn't say what time I slept till. I get up. I'm up and doing my day.
I'll start off here a little bit, because I've kind of asked some questions of staff on this issue. So several things. The first one is, and Theo, please jump in if I say something incorrect here. My understanding is, here's how the current ordinance works. You can have a rooster. You just can't have a rooster that's a nuisance. So some roosters are more vocal than others, right? I mean, that's the trick, isn't it? So if your rooster is obnoxious, then that becomes a problem. Kind of what we just said, right? It becomes a nuisance at some point, right? So at that point, you have to deal with this sound in some way. You can Google some remedies to get your rooster not to crow, or you could eat your rooster, or I don't know, get another one. But that's how it works currently. And so my understanding is what happens is, so say that you are subject to an offending rooster, you would then complain about it, and it would go to, I'm not intending to be this funny, but you would go to basically the city would look into the matter and say, hey, that rooster, you're creating a public nuisance. It's foul. Yeah, good one. You're creating a public nuisance. And so it has to be addressed in some way. And that's my understanding of generally how it works now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's treated that way. And, one of the things that we're looking at, we have our director of animal services who has proposed an SOP. Really want to sit down and probably sit with our entire code team to work with Ed, with our prosecutor, to make sure that if we're going to go down the noise nuisance route and it stays a noise nuisance only, that we tighten it up and make sure that we're following along with everything in the ordinance, or maybe even look at the ordinance and see how we can tweak it to be a little bit better. But that was kind of what the question was. Yeah.
So after I just kind of conclude by saying, so after thinking about this, looking into this, talking to staff, my preference on this would be to just leave it as is, and then have staff look at, to the extent that maybe it's not being enforced properly, why is that, and then how can we enforce it? But I'd say that I don't have any problem with people having them. This might be a case where the ordinance is not being enforced properly. So that's where I'd start. Councilman Wilson.
Well, you don't have to have a rooster when you have chickens. My son has chickens, and he doesn't have a rooster, but, he has laid. That's what he's for. It's for the eggs. He doesn't really need the rooster anyway. And my deal was okay, you can have a rooster as long as he doesn't crow. I mean, I had a rooster one time, he never crowed. So, that does happen. To to my knowledge, there's a deal that you put around his neck that stops him from crowing. I don't think it injures him, but he just doesn't let his neck expand. I mean, there's ways to do it. It also covers it, the fact that as long as if you had a rooster and he's crowing and nobody complains about him, then you're not violating anything. But if the ordinance said that the rooster can't crow, then if he's crowing and causing ordinance, then he's got to go. Yeah.
Others? Fred, just give me this. Fred's, you give me this look like.
All
County
roosters
Councilman.
must be trained to not crow before 8 a.m.
Okay.
And not exceed 85 decibels.
Okay.
Can NASA handle that?
I'll get right on it.
Yeah, right. Fred works for NASA, those of you that don't know. Are there any other comments or questions on this? Hang on. Councilwoman Simpson, sorry.
Sometimes it's okay. I was going to recommend to not look up the ways as to how you can silence a rooster. Looking at the ordinance, the existing ordinance, when I looked at it earlier today, I mean, just looking through all the language, the part that kind of stood out for me was any fowl that makes sounds or noises in an excessive, continuous, or untimely fashion is something that would be an offense, an offending rooster, what you said earlier. I don't think it's something that I would choose to ban or not allow. I mean, simply because you could replace the word fowl with dog. For example, I've got a dog that in my neighborhood that barks at all hours of the day, whether it was a rooster or a dog. It's still disturbing me. That's all I have to say.
All right, anyone else on this? Okay, so I'm sensing the direction is work with staff on this and.
Yeah, and so just so for council, just so you know, what I will work with Justin on is to work with our staff on really looking at the SOPs, make sure we can be more responsive to our residents on these matters. And, and some of it's also to help and work with all of our departments to kind of help in the process of getting this worked out. We're going to work alongside our city prosecutor, Donnie. And I know that he'll be a big part of helping us get the SOPs where they need to be, make sure we're responsive to our residents. And so, but I appreciate y'all giving me that feedback because, like I said, in a public comment session, and not knowing where the council wants to go, this is, it really helps me understand because there are so many avenues to go and I didn't want to waste staff resources going down one path and then I show up and you're like, well, no, that's not at all anything we would, consider. So appreciate that.
I would just say, and I'm reading through the ordinance again now, maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like the ordinance is pretty clear. Once you establish a nuisance, there's a prescription for abatement. So, and quite honestly, the prescription for abatement is, $2,000 a day to have your rooster crows, a pretty high price.
Or have some fried chicken. I mean,
Exactly.
I don't know, but. All right, well, we'll move on. So we're going to backtrack back up to where we were, back to item 8. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I apologize. Why don't you come on up? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, sir.
Everybody wants to crow.
Okay. All right. If you'd please give your name and your address, sir. Thank you for saying something.
Bravo.
My name is Charles Jackson. I live at 4519 Bio Bend Drive out in the Mariners Mooring subdivision. Just real quickly, I want to piggyback and thank my neighbor, Mr. Jones, for bringing up a very serious problem in our neighborhood regarding the electrical wiring that y'all already seen the pictures of. I'm going to have to fault Alan for one thing, and that is he must have not been home the day that the big boat came through with the big high tower on it that also took the power lines down for a couple of hours that night. So one additional instance that happened as well. I have kind of mixed feelings on this item regarding the crowing of the roosters. First off, I think the ordinance needs to be also amended and or discussed hens as well. You get 1 to 2 roosters crowing all hours of the day or night, they can make a lot of noise. I'm about to be 65 years old. I grew up in Dickinson. I grew up right down the street from the high school. At that time, it was country. We're not country anymore. We're subdivisions, and we need to have restrictions within those subdivisions regarding
not only roosters, but hens, and the quantity and the number of hens. 1 to 2 roosters makes a little bit of noise. Get 15 to 25 hens together and see what you get. There's no difference when it comes to your fowl, when it comes to nuisance as far as noise. Secondly, and I appreciate the fact that on the information that I was able to get regarding the council meeting, an agenda item data sheet 10A that was provided that actually gave me a lot of information about Texas chicken laws. Ms. Earps, I believe I don't know, I saw your name for submitting staff member. But
She's our
regardless-
go-to chicken expert. So.
Just to point out that on this agenda item, there were 20, I think, 1 or 2 cities listed. Out of those cities, at least 13 of them had restrictions on not just roosters, but also hens. The restrictions dealt with not only the distance between your neighbor's hen house to your property line and to your place of residence, but some of them also included the number of quantity of chickens and how much that distance required. So what I would like really to see discussed with the council would be a little bit more involvement in the total fowl category, because everything is not covered under the animal enforcement area. So those are the items that I would like to be addressed, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. With that said, I will ask, what does the ordinance say currently about hens?
There's no, well, I mean, so basically for a noise nuisance portion of it, it basically hens and roosters, all fall under the fowl ordinance. But what I would say is that since we are talking about animal control ordinances, that's talking about, prohibiting and limiting owning roosters, I would say it's still open. I think that's a totally valid.
It feels close enough.
Feel like we
can still
right in
talk
the
about it.
ballpark.
Yeah.
What I'd say is that, that's definitely an area, if that's something of interest to council, if they would like for us to kind of look at, restricting. Of course, when we were discussing it with Mr. Elliott, it was obviously we were talking about kind of like the noise nuisance portion, but we're absolutely, if there's any guidance or direction you'd like, if you want us to look into, like kind of some areas of
So hens
ownership.
would be covered under this same ordinance, or only roosters?
No, what we have right now is covers everything.
Texas chicken laws.
So it covers roosters and hens both?
Yes.
So the same procedure would apply if you had
On noise nuisance, yes.
So if you had hens that created a nuisance, you would use the same procedure?
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess to our commenters, point is that, obviously sometimes maybe ownership, I guess the question is, do you want us to look into like the number, where the position of the hen house is and things of that nature, if that's even something y'all want to look into at this time, or?
Just speaking for myself, it feels like it's somewhat of a similar issue in that if the hen, that we need to just make sure the enforcement is occurring, because if the hens are causing the same noise nuisance as the rooster is, then it would be addressed in the same way. And so the same issue would sort of apply, it seems to me. I don't know about others. I see Councilman Lynn's nodding his head.
Yes,
Okay, anyone else?
I agree.
Councilman Wilson, you
I think the ordinance covers pretty much on the chickens, the way it is right now. It's just like I said, the whole thing is a problem. The whole thing is a noise issue, no matter how you look at it. I mean, and I understand the lady back there that, grew up listening to rooster crow and everything else. But if you have one that crows, doesn't know when to go to bed so he can be up in time to crow when he's supposed to.
Eat that rooster.
That gets a little monotonous.
It sounds like you're in agreement, actually, because you said you disagreed, but it
And
sounds
you're
like
saying you disagree with the speaker, but agree
never
with
mind.
us.
Sorry, I thought you were disagreeing with the mayor.
That wouldn't be uncommon.
It wouldn't be, but, okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to item 8A. Okay. Item 8A, conduct a public hearing concerning a request for a specific use permit for a church in a general commercial zoning district for approximately .215 acres located at 2512 Termini Street and legally described as Abstract 19, Harry and Austin Lot 10, O through L, 187, Termini S-D, Highway 3, Dickinson, will convene the public hearing at, I think my watch is wrong. What time is it?
8:53.
At 8:53. Yvonne, if you would.
Mayor, council, and the community. So this property is located at 2512 Termini. It's pretty much kind of catty corner to City Hall here at Highway 3 and 517. It is an existing strip center, the existing strip center, and they're planning on leasing an existing space. What the specific use permit for is for a church in a general commercial zoning district, That's all that staff has.
All right, we have the applicant presentation section. Is someone here to present? All right, thank you, sir.
Good evening, and I'm sorry for my misunderstood.
No problem at all, at all. If you
My
give
name
us your
is-
name and address again.
My name is Enrique Ordonez. My address is 20911 Capulin Glaze Drive in Hockley. As you can see, I'm in representation of the church. We're here because of the first hearing that we have here. I think maybe it was misunderstood about the parking spot. There are in this commercial local. I think they are the song engineers that they described that there's only 12 spots for parking. Which one, if somebody can come at the place and know that that's a wrong number, we have a spot for 18 cars. Also, that we're gonna start a church. We're not gonna need even maybe like 8 spots for the car. Maybe we're gonna be needing maybe like 5, maybe 7 spots. At the moment that we know that we are reaching maybe the 12 or 13 spot, we're gonna know it's time to move on. Besides that, I just said before, we have 18 spots for parking. And also, we at the beginning, we target this place because we know on this place before we're running 3 churches and they got the permit. So we didn't see any inconvenience for that we could start another church in this place. Let me see, what else could I add? Let me see. Well, nothing else. Just say that you're studying, and we're expecting. As I told you before, we're working in the Word of God. This is something that we are trying to help the community, not only spiritually, but in some other items around that we could help. That's what I can add. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. We have, next is public comments. We have one public comment on this. Is this for item 8A or 8B? Diana Glass? For 8, for either one? Okay, well, come on up.
Okay, I'm Diana Glass. My address is 815 Riverside, Alvin. We've had the building here in Dickinson for over 50 years, since 60-something. I don't understand why EDC said that whatever we had, if we have a church in there, whatever's going into Amity would be offended by a church. I don't know what y'all would let go in there that would be offended. Maybe I'd be offended. So that's, I don't understand that. I don't know. EDC won't tell me what's going in there, and they said that it would benefit me, but it'd still be offended by a church. And I don't understand that. But anyway, I've had a church in there since 2013, since right after Ike, and I've never had an issue. So I would like a special permit.
And we can't respond at this point. But.
Yeah, I know, but
Okay.
that's really all. If you'd caught me after the P&Z meeting, I had a long letter,
Okay,
and it was not nice. So anyway, that's it.
thank you, ma'am. Applicant's rebuttal, there is likely not an applicant's rebuttal, so we will adjourn the public hearing at 8:58 p.m. And we will take up item 8B, but we need to go to executive session first, so we will come back after that. So we're going to go ahead and move on to item 8C. So yeah, don't go anywhere. Item 8C, conduct a public hearing concerning a request for a specific use permit for a church in a neighborhood commercial zoning district for approximately .33 acres located at 5818 East FM 517 and legally described as Abstract 36 WG Banks Lots 5 through 6, 7, and 8, Block 2, Tropical Gardens. We will convene this public hearing at 8:58 p.m. and we'll turn it over to staff presentation by Yvonne Briscoe.
And if you can go ahead and go about 5 slides.
Sorry, we're making it, putting Anna through her paces tonight with these agendas.
One more, please, yes. One more again, one more. There we go. Okay, this property is actually located south of East FM 517. So it's on the east end of town. Next slide, please. The property is currently vacant, and what they are actually requesting is a specific use permit for a church in the neighborhood commercial zoning district. What they're proposing is approximately a 2,800 square foot church with parking. Next slide. They gave us quite a few plans. So you've actually got the internal layout, and then on the next one, you've actually got the elevations. Just again, special use permit for a church just south of 517. Thank you.
All right. Applicant's presentation. Is there someone here to speak on this? No? Okay. Any public comments? Diana, did you want to speak again on this one, or no? Okay. All right. No applicant's rebuttal, so we'll adjourn the public hearing at 9 p.m. Okay. And this one on item 8D, we will also, there's a legal matter we need to discuss in executive session, so we'll do that here in a little bit. We'll move on to item 8E. Conduct a public hearing concerning a request to amend the official zoning map from conventional residential zoning district to neighborhood commercial zoning district for approximately .54 acres located at 3707 Fado Drive and legally described as Abstract 19 Perry and Austin, sir, part of lots 158 and 183, 0 through 5, Dickinson Addition D. And we will convene the public hearing at 9 p.m. and we'll turn that over again to Ms. Briscoe.
Yes, thank you. Anna? This piece of property is actually located south of 517 and east of Fada Drive. There is an existing strip center located on the property. Go ahead. So currently, because it's already zoned conventional residential, it's actually got multiple tenant spaces in there and parking and everything for it. So as I like to do with zoning changes, what's current is conventional residential and what's being proposed is neighborhood commercial. Because it is actually already not fitting conventional residential, that is the reason why we're proposing the neighborhood commercial. Specific uses the same way, but it would actually just change what's available for this property. So currently, the property is considered non-conforming use and non-conforming structure. So they can actually continue the use, they just can't expand it. Where we run into issues is when tenants go in and out. At that point in zoning, it's just a determination a lot of times by the zoning official on whether or not it would be allowed. Anna? Currently, inside the strip center, there's a chiropractic, insurance, a mortgage company. All of the existing businesses do fit the neighborhood commercial zoning district. And that's what all staff has.
If I can just real quick, to follow up real quick, and Yvonne did a great job on this. What I do want to point out to the council is that what you have is, and it's very important to understand, it's already a non-conforming use in the sense that for some reason this parcel was zoned to be residential, and it's never going to be that way. It's going to be this neighborhood commercial with these uses, and I'm sure you probably know the little center is kind of one that's, kind of not facing 517, but facing the drive-in. And so what I was going to say is that really what this does is if you're talking about, like being business friendly and being able to take some of the red tape out as tenants are moving in and out, they would already pretty much be able to get into the place because as long as they're, under neighborhood commercial, but they do have to get a determination from the zoning official before they could move forward, where what this does, it says, look, we know that this is neighborhood commercial, zone it this way so that we can skip a step, start cutting a little bit of the red tape so that we can get people moved in business-wise.
Thank you. Do we have an applicant presentation for this? Come on up, sir. If you could give your name and your address, please.
My name is Tim Larson. I live at 2412 Lake Shadows Lane in Friendswood. I'm the property manager of this property, and we actually have one more tenant who just moved into the front. It's like a jewelry art thing. But this property just happened to be missed years ago. There was a zoning change in 2001. This property was built in 1986, so there was some sort of error. And what it creates in the real estate world is it's kind of like a cloud on title. So the owner is wishing to get this discrepancy altered, and then ease of use for the tenants and applying for permits and whatnot. So this is not the only property that has this issue, and I think the previous meeting I went to, they talked about identifying other properties throughout Dickinson that have a similar issue that just happened to be missed in 2001. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you, sir. We have no public comments for this item and no applicant rebuttal, so we'll adjourn the public hearing at 9:04 p.m. We'll move on to item 8F, consideration and possible action on an ordinance concerning a request to amend the official zoning map from conventional residential zoning district to neighborhood commercial zoning district for approximately 0.54 acres located at 3707 Fata Drive and legally described as Abstract 19, Perry and Austin, Sir, part of lots 158 and 183, 0 through 5, Dickinson Edition D. Do we have a motion?
If you'll go to the next slide, thank you.
Uh,
I just want to
just-
let you know,
oh,
planning and zoning recommends approval. No?
We need a motion. Is there a motion? There's a motion by Councilman Brantley to approve. Is there a second? Second. There's a second by Councilman Linton. Please, go ahead.
Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on April 19th, and they recommend approval.
All right. Are there any comments or questions? Go ahead, Councilman Wilson.
This was actually a mistake when they did the zoning, because I know the developer of that deal, and it was always supposed to be what it was. As a matter of fact, the first building was supposed to be Dennis Cook's insurance office, so. But yeah, that one, and as a matter of fact, I don't know if they have the same problem with the ones directly across the road. Okay, doesn't surprise me.
Makes no sense to be zoned as it is. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're going to skip around again. We're going to go to item 11, executive session. Item 11A, Texas Local Government Code, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney. Discussion with attorney regarding contemplated/pending litigation and regarding matters discussed by the attorney-client privilege. We will adjourn into executive session at 9:06 p.m. Item 12A, action items from executive session. Item 12A, consideration and possible action concerning legal matters discussed in executive session. Is there a motion? Turn on your mic, please.
Motion to accept the reasonable accommodation request from Tony Chapman and TNT Recovery, Inc. for the home located at 1550 Ridge Drive in Dickinson.
So moved.
All right, there's a motion by Councilman Brantley, a second by Councilman Simpson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're going back in time again to item 8C. Item 8C. I'm sorry, not 8C, 8B, excuse me, 8B. Consideration and possible action on an ordinance concerning a request for a specific use permit for a church in a general commercial zoning district for approximately .215 acres located at 2512 Termini Street and legally described as Abstract 19, Perion Austin, Lot 10, O through L, 187 Termini, S through D, Highway 3, Dickinson. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve, motion to approve by Councilman Brantley. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Councilman Simpson. Is there any discussion? I would like to, I do have, we have an applicant here.
No, he's just a guest. That's not the applicant. They left.
Did he?
They left.
Okay. Okay, well, we have to do this again though, right? So we have to do 2 readings,
Do you want the
correct?
recommendation and comments from staff?
I mean,
From-
we're aware, but we have to do 2 readings, correct, at least? I believe it is.
Yes, it's usually 2 readings.
Only 2 readings by charter, only 2. There's no 3 readings.
Y'all say up to 3 readings, but your charter has always designated 2.
Okay, but my point is.
They're going to be back, so
Okay, so that's fine.
Need to
Okay.
come, but basically you're going to have to tell them they need to come back because there are going to be some conditions.
We do have some conditions, so we don't need to worry about those at this moment, though, since they're not here.
Okay.
There any other discussion here?
Is that anything that I need to add before the next meeting? The conditions that you
you
want?
can go ahead and place them in.
The 2 conditions would be, 1 would be contingent on appropriate parking, is that right? That's how we put it. And the second one, we do have some questions about the potential for future businesses to serve alcohol in the vicinity, and that they would be willing to allow for a waiver to allow those businesses to serve alcohol.
Okay. And then they submitted a shared parking where it's the times of day that's listed in the code, which is what would allow them to have adequate parking. Is that sufficient?
That it would be adequate parking, and I guess what we're saying is that if at some point there was not adequate parking, that they would address that. Preferably, probably by not being there, but I mean, essentially, that they're not gonna exceed the parking limit of the lot.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Or did I get everything? Okay. All right. Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, that'll move us on to item 8D. Consideration and possible action on an ordinance concerning a request for a specific use permit for a church in a neighborhood commercial zoning district for approximately .33 acres located at 5818 East FM 517 and legally described as Abstract 36 WG Banks Lot 5, 6, 7, and 8, Block 2, Tropical Gardens.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilman Brantley, a second by Councilman Decker. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? With 1 vote no, motion carries. All right, now let me reorient here. We are to item, I believe, 10B. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, now we're back in order. Item 10B. Well, we're going to do 10B before we do 10C. No, 10B. 10B.
Tonight, you sure we're going to do it that way?
I don't know, I might get crazy. See what I want to do. Let's do adjournment now. No, okay. Item 10B, consideration and possible action concerning a resolution of Dickinson, Texas, authorizing professional service provider selection for Unified Development Code, UDC, authorizing the city manager to execute any and all documents necessary to effectuate an agreement for such services, providing for the incorporation of preamble, and providing an effective date. Is there a
Mayor,
motion to approve?
Oh,
Move to approve.
The motion approved by Councilman Brantley, second by Councilman Wilson. Yes, City Manager.
Sorry, I jumped in a little too early. Mayor, council, I just want to take a couple of moments. Actually, it's kind of interesting. We had a gentleman here that was talking about, and also we talked about development code issues. We talked about zoning issues and having, this non-conforming use due to errors in the prior zoning map. And what you have here this evening is, after having done an RFQ, request for qualifications for those of you keeping score, is that the city received and is recommending working with Kindig Keist Collaborative, KKC, in regard to really revamping how we do everything in the city and development. Back in 2001, when the zoning code was put in place, actually, the Keist in Kindig Keist is Brett Keist, who wrote the codes in the past. And what he explained was that, basically, the way it was driven and the way it was set up was very much in, the main purpose was preservation of neighborhoods. It was, obviously tree preservation and things of that nature. Obviously, over the years, economies change, also trying to accommodate more for mixed-use development, stepping away from special use permits and actually putting those uses into the code and putting uses in their proper places rather than having a very large list of special use categories, really limiting that. And what you would see here as part of the scope of work is to really revamp, modernize, really look at the current economy, and revamping our unified, our development code across several chapters, and really putting it under what the Unified Development Code would do is replace all these separate chapters, 9, 14, 15, 16, 18, and Appendix A, bring them up to speed, and also put them in one document as well. So basically, when a developer is saying, I want to build in the city of Dickinson, it is in this one place. You don't have to, so you have to go to code, chapter 8, and then you have to go switch to chapter 13, and some of them are even in conflict with each other because when the code was written in 01, when you realize, well, maybe that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe we didn't realize the unintended consequences. So then you changed an ordinance in one chapter, but now it's in conflict with another chapter. So we do have some conflicts within our code that would have to be rectified. And all of these things, if we're talking about becoming a business-friendly city, working with developers, but also getting the right type of development, making sure that we're being a best practices city is going to be huge in our recruitment of new business, recruitment of good developers, ones that will respect our existing neighborhoods and things of that nature. It's very important that we put a good foot forward and let them know that we mean, we have good codes, we have a competent staff that is going to walk you step by step through the process. Another area that I wanted to give special highlight to is Appendix A, which is the subdivision ordinance. That needs to be revamped completely. Back in the day, subdivision ordinances really only dealt with the fact that what's the lot size. Now subdivision ordinances really look at a lot of other things. One of the big ones that we have a glaring missing area in, and that is we do not require a parkland dedication at all. And so that's very problematic because as we have, our own residents have talked about the lack of parks and accessibility to parks kind of in the neighborhood settings. And so really, unless you have an HOA, and usually they're really small parks, our neighboring cities, by having a parkland dedication, have a much stronger negotiation to require the developer to provide more space, better amenities, a fee in lieu of park space really allows you to negotiate some things for quality of life initiatives. And so we don't have that option at all with the current subdivision ordinance. And you heard tonight, we have to really redo the map again. And so we're going to be working through all of that. And the other thing I was going to also bring up to you guys is that as part of this project, I've requested that we have an interactive map that I'm going to be working with our information technology team to have a bridge with Galveston County Central Appraisal District so that we're getting on a regular basis updated tax information that would be automatically put into this interactive map. So when you click on our zoning map, you would get the zoning, ordinances, and the district it's in. You would get the tax information so if you're interested in buying a piece of property, you would go usually to a tax office to find out the information. You would have that in one place. You will also get all of the Unified Development Code chapters that apply to that piece of property, all in one place. Things that would usually take 4 or 5 calls on the phone, because one call would have to go to the planner, another may have to go to the building official, another call would be the fire marshal. And if you didn't get them all in one place, where this can all be in one place on the internet in a very easy. And one of the best things that I've done was actually with developers was to actually develop these interactive maps and provide that as a tool, because now it became way less questions, a lot less engineering comments. Because that's usually what happens is they think they've hit every chapter. Then they show up to their first pre-development meeting, and it's like we have 20 comments, and they're like, well, I didn't even know where to look for that, you know? And so then you're whittling down those comments to an acceptable area where usually we can cut those comments down to under 10 and get that process moving along further. The other thing I was going to request was for us to have basically an economic analysis done. Just because we want something to be zoned a certain thing does not necessarily mean that is necessarily the best, thing to zone it. And so while we can zone any parcel, anything we want to add another component to understanding what are some limitations to some of the zoning, be able to say maybe some of these properties that we want to zone commercial are too small. And having an economic analysis saying, hey, maybe a replat of some of these parcels would actually make it more commercially viable. Along the way would be a more interactive way for us to zone more competently throughout the city. We're probably looking at about a 15-month process to do all of the code diagnostics, to do all of the work necessary to get feedback from our community, feedback from our council, especially looking at the future land use and character plan. One of the things I've asked Ken DeKeese to do as well as part of this process is that one of the biggest bang for buck plans that you can have is a Texas Parks and Wildlife certified master parks plan. And so that's not part of this project, but I was going to say is that if this is approved tonight, in a few weeks, I would be requesting an addendum added for a master parks plan. Now, you may say, why would you spend $30,000, $40,000 for this master parks plan? One of the big ones is that we were looking at activating the bayou, finding some adequate walking and biking trails, adding mobility to that. You've already approved a mobility study to be done, to be working with one firm, and so being able to tie a master parks and mobility plan together would be huge. But most importantly, if you get a Texas Parks and Wildlife certified plan, a lot of cities do not get it pre-approved by Texas Parks and Wildlife. When we want to go out for walking trail grants and you want to get boating access grants, the first question they ask is your master plan approved by Texas Parks and Wildlife? If you get that, you get extra points. Points are the most important thing in getting grants and really separates you from the group. And so Texas Parks and Wildlife has an 80-20 match on walking trails. So for, say, a $40,000 master parks plan, if you get a walking trail grant, in many cases, they'll award up to $300,000 to $400,000 to your $100,000 match, which kind of has a bang for buck on the very first grant you receive. I've received a boating access grant in a prior city in Gladewater. And there we received about $330,000 to rehabilitate a boat ramp, as well as adding a small marina to the lake there. And that was really nice as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I'll take any questions, comments, concerns to talk with you guys. And the other thing I was going to bring up too is that Management District has been gracious and has been in part of the conversation. We'll be talking about some cost share opportunities with the Management District and EDC on this.
Okay, so really tonight, we're just talking about selecting someone for this.
So yes, it's selection with this scope of work. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about cost
Okay.
share later.
So that's really that's really the topic, just so everybody's clear. We're not so much getting into the UDC itself, but.
We're not getting into the UDC. We are selecting Kinder Keystone
Correct.
on this scope of work.
Correct. Are there any questions or comments with that understanding? Councilman Simpson?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think this is definitely a needed work. I am, for one, tired of hearing businesses say they don't want to open up in Dickinson because the codes are too cumbersome. And so I think this is definitely along the way, and I think moving towards a little more mixed use over residential is definitely the way to go. And I'm always, particularly with the subdivision, the parks part, that's a great way to get more park use in Dickinson without burdening the taxpayers by the city taking care of it. So if new subdivisions go up and there's a public access park, I think that's a great way to head, and then I'm always on board for the plans.
To that point, Councilman Simpson, just so you know, one of the things that really worked out really well in Dayton was that the parkland dedication requirement was 15% of the land had to be dedicated to parkland. So when we negotiate our 7,200 acre subdivision, they had to set aside basically about 990 something acres of land to be developed for parks over the next 25 years.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10C, consideration and possible action. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dickinson, Texas, adopting the Code of Ethics for officials as defined in this article, whether elected or appointed, paid or unpaid, to serve not only as a guide for official conduct of the city's public servants, but also as a basis for discipline for those who refuse to abide by its terms, the overriding interest being that such officers of the city shall at all times strive to avoid even the appearance of impropriety.
Second.
A motion approved by Councilman Wilson, a second by Councilman Simpson. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10D, consideration and possible action concerning an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dickinson, Texas, adopting Dickinson Council Rules of Order and Business, or rules. Motion approved by Councilman Wilson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Decker. Any discussion? Yes, Councilman Wilson.
I thought we adopted several years ago Robert's Rules of Order.
This is different. This isn't for like actually running the meeting. This is related to like deadlines to submit an agenda item and things like that.
Yeah, and so it's not in conflict. What we're doing is we're kind of taking in what was like previous policy, because there is that part that says Robert's Rules. So Robert's Rules is kind of just one section. What we're looking at are deadlines for agendas. We're also, the other thing I will say is if we just remind me, Justin, is that one change that we do need to make is I put 6:30 and not 7 o'clock on those meetings, and I am sorry about that. I must have had an EDC on my mind for some reason.
Okay.
And there's a few other little cleanup things that staff will cover before.
This is
the
two
next meeting.
readings, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
Okay.
So you'll clean up. One thing I will say, this is not the attorney hat. This is from administration side, is that I noticed in there that you're wanting to do all items to be on the agenda are submitted to Anna 1 week prior to the meeting. I think that works fine. It would be really beneficial if we're looking forward to making that gap a little bit, like bumping that another week. And the reason we're doing that is because a couple things. For me, for an attorney review, this illegal hat on again, that gives me not just more time to do it, but I think I can do a much better, a thorough job of looking at everything on the agenda and giving you opinion. And then if there's things like even, and I think in this ordinance itself, it references an ordinance number, and I think that might not be part of what we have, or it's an incorrect number. More time for us as staff to work through and figure out what it is that we can make comments for you. And if there's something item that one of you, council member, wants to put on an agenda, that's more time for us to work together to make sure we got everything ready to go, how you want to see it, and then we can have those discussions. And that's just again, if there was a way we could bump that out to 2 weeks before the meeting, then that would be great. And I know that means some changing for schedules for you and staff, but.
It actually it'd make it a lot easier because we can easily, right now is such a moving target to try to get agenda set up that if we knew we had a hard deadline, that this is when the agenda item has to be in because our rules of order that the council has approved, unless there's and there are some emergency provisions in there. Sometimes a contract comes up that, if we're about to miss a deadline for something slips through, there's a way, but we'll make sure that that's maybe a separate section of the agenda saying this is something that was after the deadline, so here's your supplemental packet, and please be mindful. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So given we have to do 2 readings, are there any, they can make changes to the next reading? So I know one we talked about was there's in there, so our charter, it says the mayor, it should just say consultation with the mayor, not concurrence. And then I think if we want to do the 2 weeks, do the 2 weeks.
So
Councilman Brand.
if I have a couple of things, and I want to preface this by saying, to your point, none of this is in reflection of the mayor whatsoever. I have a great deal of respect, but I think there are a couple of changes that just bring it more in line with the charter. Under item number 3, and this is something I just recognized, a special meeting may be held upon the request of the mayor or any 3 council members. Our charter actually gives the city manager the authority to call a special
But
meeting.
it also gives me as well.
Sure. But should it not include the city manager, the mayor, and 3 council members?
It's just left out of there?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's left out.
Gotcha.
You brought up the other one, which is in the first sentence of paragraph 6. I would move to strike concurrence from consultation to say, city manager, city secretary, in consultation with the mayor, shall prepare agenda. The other one in that same paragraph is the item should be placed on the agenda of the next regular meeting unless the mayor, in consultation with the city manager, determines that delaying the requested item will be contrary to the city's best interest. So, and that's simply just bringing it in line with what our charter says. The other item I wanted to bring up, I do not have language for, but I had, right. So, Justin, and this would obviously, out of, concurrence with the, word keeps coming up, concurrence, but with approval from the city council, one thing that I would like to request, you brought up a week's lead time. I actually would extend that to 10 days, maybe 14 days.
In 2 weeks is what he said, 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I would be fine with that. The other thing I would ask, and this is something I spoke with the city manager about, is if it would be possible to make it our policy that a draft agenda be issued to city council in order to allow preparation for the meeting a week in advance. So we would at least get a draft agenda, a draft packet a week in advance to allow us opportunity to thoroughly prepare and research prior to a meeting.
Yeah, I think that can be done. I think as long as everyone understands that maybe he will not have done all legal review. I mean, unless you have a problem with
I'm
them
a
getting-
superstar, so don't sell me short
Oh,
here.
never
man.
mind. Never mind. Pardon
So
me.
Justin just said he has no problem with that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's the big thing. So we can definitely, we can set up some type of draft, like basically, just understand it could be very rough. It may be just one of those things where we're, throwing we're not gonna be agenda posting ready, meaning you may get we may put out an agenda that looks like just a topic. It won't say consider with possible action. It's like, here are topics, here set, 10A is gonna be special use permit for a church. And it won't say a whole lot. You go to that section, it'll have everything, because obviously a lot of times, a lot of this language has to come from the attorney to make sure we're, kosher with state law, but as long as y'all know, it can be a little rough, but we can definitely get y'all kind of the rough drafts of all the contracts and everything, give y'all plenty of lead time on that.
Sure. And that's my biggest concern, currently, and I haven't served long, but currently, when you only have 3 days essentially to prepare and you want to be as well-versed and researched as you can, it makes it extremely difficult, especially if we want to speak with the mayor or speak with you as a city manager. It makes it tough. So I would ask if part of our policy could, and not the final, a draft is fine, just so that we know what we're preparing for.
All right. So we can incorporate that into the final version. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Hearing none, we'll take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 10E, consideration and possible action concerning an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dickinson, Texas, amending and restating the City of Dickinson policy on board and commission member appointment and eligibility.
Move to approve.
Motion approved by Councilman Brantley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Linton. Any discussion?
I will just say, sorry, I would say, just say that I'm excited about this policy. I think this is a fantastic policy. I'm excited for what it's going to bring to our volunteers that choose to serve the city, and bring some transparency to that process. And I think it also answers a lot of questions that the public has voiced about our appointments to boards and commissions. So kudos to you and staff's work for putting this together. I think it's an excellent policy. So good job.
Theo worked on that, and then I know Jesse and myself, we also worked with him on that to kind of get something in front of council, so.
And just so you know, we're going to be updating, we'll need to update our board application packets. I'll may task our wonderful graphic design and guru, Jeree, to get us something revamped and get us maybe a more modern application to be a part of this policy adoption, so.
All right. Any other comments here? All right, hearing none, take this to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moves us to item 13, adjournment.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Councilman Wilson, second by Councilman Brantley. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 10:09 p.m.
Already?
We haven't had a long one in a while, actually.